She meets Daniel from Tinder at a bar, and though he seems ordinary, small details unsettle her. His eyes linger too long, his answers slip, and he avoids drinking. When he suggests moving to a quieter place, she reluctantly follows, only to realize he has access to a closed shop filled with bottles. Inside, he pours wine without asking, his demeanor shifting. She notices the edge of a broken bottle hidden under his jacket, and the air grows heavier. Her instincts flare, yet he blocks the exit, his voice calm but stripped of warmth, trapping her in mounting dread. I was 22 when I agreed to meet someone from Tinder for the first time. His name was Daniel, and his profile seemed harmless. A few pictures at coffee shops, a dog sitting on his lap, a short bio about loving books and hiking. I remember telling my roommate Sarah that it felt casual, nothing serious, just a drink at a quiet bar near campus. I dressed in a simple black dress, slipped on my glasses, and told myself it was no different from meeting anyone new in class. The night air was crisp, the kind that makes you feel alive, and the city lights softened the nerves buzzing in my stomach. The bar was warm, crowded with people talking over low music. Daniel waved from a corner booth. In person, he looked taller, lean, with neat hair and a calm expression. We talked about classes, his job at a bookstore, Sarah's stories about our apartment. At first, it felt easy, almost too easy. He didn't drink much, kept adjusting his watch, and asked me more questions than I asked him. His eyes lingered longer than they should have, and sometimes his answers slipped, like he forgot which version of himself he was supposed to be. I brushed it off, told myself I was overthinking, and stayed for another round. After an hour, he suggested leaving. He said there was a better place down the street, quieter, with good wine. I hesitated, but followed him out. The night was colder, the sidewalks thinning of people. We stopped at a small shop with dim lights, half of it closed off. He unlocked the side door like he had been there before. Inside, shelves of bottles lined the walls, the air heavy with alcohol and dust. He poured 2 glasses without asking, setting one in front of me. My throat tightened. Something in the way he handled the glass, the way his eyes sharpened, told me I had walked into a trap. I reached for my phone, pretending to check a message, but his hand brushed mine, firm and controlling. The glass on the table caught a glint from the overhead light, and I saw the jagged neck of a broken bottle tucked beneath his jacket. My pulse raced so loud it drowned the silence. I stood, muttering about needing air, but he blocked the door. His calm tone slipped, revealing a flatness that chilled me more than anger ever could. I thought of Sarah, of how careless I had been to leave without telling her the exact address. Every instinct screamed that this man was not who he claimed to be. What happened next is still a blur. The door creaked open, a delivery driver stepping in with boxes, startled to find us inside. The distraction gave me seconds. I shoved past Daniel, heart hammering, and ran into the street. The driver shouted something, but I only heard my own breath tearing through the cold night. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station, shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. Later, police searched and found nothing. No bottles, no sign he had been there. I never saw Daniel again, though sometimes I wake at night with the taste of wine in my mouth and the echo of glass breaking. Part 2. I had been traveling through the state for work, too tired to drive further when night fell. The highway was nearly empty, the lights of passing towns fading behind me. I spotted a narrow road with a faded sign that read simply, Linden Rest. I thought it might lead to food or a bed. After 10 minutes, I came upon a small hotel that looked misplaced, like a relic from decades ago. Its sign flickered faintly, and the parking lot held only 2 cars. Inside, the lobby was warm but oddly quiet. The desk bell sat untouched, and a woman eventually appeared from the back. She had kind eyes, but spoke very little, handing me an actual brass key with a number tag. No forms, no questions, just the key. I found it strange, though I welcomed the simplicity. Climbing the stairs, I noticed each step creaked and the wallpaper peeled in thin strips, exposing wood underneath. The hallway smelled faintly of old smoke, though no one seemed around. My room was small but tidy, the furniture plain, the lamp dim. I placed my bag down, grateful for the bed. Yet the silence pressed heavy. I tried turning on the TV, but it only showed static. Lying down, I closed my eyes, but a faint sound tugged at me, something like soft footsteps pacing above. When I glanced at the ceiling, dust fell as if someone dragged furniture across the floor. I assumed there must be another guest, but I remembered how few cars I had seen outside. The night stretched. At some point, I awoke to the sound of the hallway outside my door. Slow, deliberate steps. They paused right in front of my room. I held my breath, waiting. Then came the faint rattle of the doorknob. I stared at it, frozen, as the metal trembled under invisible fingers. It stopped abruptly, followed by silence so deep I could hear my heartbeat. After what felt like minutes, I gathered the courage to check. The hallway was empty, stretching dim and endless. I went back inside, locking the door again, yet unease settled deep in my stomach. Around 3 in the morning, a whisper threaded through the room. Not from outside, but within. My name, spoken so softly I thought I had dreamed it. I pulled the blanket closer, refusing to look around. The air grew colder, and I smelled something damp, like river water seeping through walls. Shadows shifted unnaturally across the corners, though the lamp remained steady. I forced myself to keep still until exhaustion took me. Morning light seeped through the curtains, and with it came relief. The hotel looked ordinary again, though an odd detail gnawed at me. The furniture had shifted. The chair I remembered near the wall was now angled toward the bed. I decided not to question it, reminding myself I needed rest before continuing my trip. At breakfast, I found only one other person, a man in his 40s, eating toast alone. He didn't look at me, his eyes fixed on nothing, almost vacant. The woman at the desk avoided my gaze, placing food silently before leaving the room. That second night, dread built before darkness even fell. I kept the lights on, determined not to be caught off guard. Still, as midnight approached, the same pattern returned. Footsteps above, pacing slowly, followed by scraping sounds along the walls. I pressed my ear to the door, and the air on the other side felt unnaturally cold. The knob began to twitch again, harder this time, rattling violently, as if someone demanded to be let in. I shouted, but no reply came. Only silence, until the knob went still. Moments later, the whisper returned, closer now. A woman's voice, low and broken, repeating my name with a strange sorrow. I turned to see the mirror fogging, though the air was dry. Slowly, words formed in the mist. Stay. My chest tightened. I wanted to run, but some part of me was rooted, unable to disobey the strange pull. When I finally moved, I caught sight of the chair, now pressed directly against the bed. As if someone had been sitting there, watching through the night. I barely slept. By morning, my nerves felt raw. I asked the desk woman if someone had occupied the room above mine. She froze, lips parting, but said nothing. Her silence told me more than words could. The other guest from yesterday was gone. His table empty, his car missing from the lot. When I mentioned it, she only shook her head slightly, almost in warning. I understood then. People came here, but not all of them left. That night became the worst. The pacing never stopped, circling endlessly until I thought the ceiling would crack. Around 2, the mirror fogged again, the same word appearing. But now something else surfaced too. A figure reflected where there should have been only me. A woman, pale and thin, her dress soaked as though she had risen from water. Her eyes hollow, yet they locked on mine with unbearable weight. The whisper rose louder until it filled the room. My name stretched into a wail. The door burst open though I had locked it. Cold air swept through, extinguishing the lamp. The figure stepped from the reflection into the room itself, dripping, leaving dark stains across the carpet. My body refused to move. She leaned close, her wet hair brushing my face. Then she repeated, not stay this time, but follow. A desperate plea, not a command. I don't remember how I ended up outside. The hallway seemed endless, twisting wrong, doors repeating the same numbers. I stumbled until I reached the lobby, but it was empty, lights flickering like the sign outside. The desk bell rang on its own, sharp and accusing. Behind me, footsteps followed, fast and relentless. I ran through the doors into the night, gasping, never once daring to look back. When I finally reached the main road, dawn was breaking. The hotel was gone. Only an empty lot stretched behind me, weeds swaying where the building should have stood. My car was parked as if I had never left it. The key I had been given sat heavy in my hand, brass cold against my palm. Etched across it were not numbers, but letters forming the word stay. Even now, I keep that key locked in a drawer, though sometimes I hear it rattle in the night. And every so often, when silence grows thick, I smell the damp air of that place again. Part 3. The Silent Hallway. I checked into another small roadside hotel after driving longer than I should have. It was tucked behind an old diner with a sign that barely lit up, the kind of place you pick when you are too tired to keep going. At first glance, it felt harmless, even welcoming, though I noticed only 3 cars in the lot. Inside, the man at the front desk greeted me with an odd stillness. He spoke politely, but without warmth, handing me a key with a faded number on it. A young woman passed through the lobby at the same moment, her gaze brushing mine before she hurried upstairs. Something in her face lingered with me, like she wanted to speak but thought better of it. The hallways were narrow, the carpet worn down to threads, yet the place had a strange charm. My room was small with an old radiator clanking in the corner. Across the hall, I could hear voices, a man and a woman arguing softly. Their words were muffled, but the tension in their tones carried easily. I lay on the bed listening longer than I should have, uneasy about the way the argument never seemed to pause for breath. Then suddenly it stopped, cut off mid-sentence, as though someone had turned off a switch. Silence thickened, and I wondered if I had imagined it. Still, when I stepped into the hall, the air felt different, colder, and the door across from me was cracked open just an inch. I told myself to ignore it, to close my own door and forget, but curiosity got the better of me. I leaned closer, hearing what sounded like someone pacing inside. When I glanced through the gap, I caught sight of the woman I had passed earlier in the lobby. She stood perfectly still by the window, her back to me. A man sat slumped in a chair, his face hidden in shadow. Something about the scene felt wrong, like a painting rather than real life. I pulled away quickly, heart hammering, and shut myself inside. That night, I left the light on and tried to convince myself exhaustion was making things feel off. The second night became harder to explain. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow and steady, stopping directly outside my door. I froze, waiting for a knock that never came. The handle trembled once, then stopped. When I finally looked through the peephole, no one was there. But across the hall, the door I had peeked through the day before was now wide open, dark inside. I should have called the front desk, but I knew the man downstairs would only stare at me with that expressionless face. Instead, I stepped into the hallway. The air was colder than before, and a faint smell of damp earth clung to the walls. The room across the way appeared empty, yet the chair in the corner rocked back and forth as though someone had just risen from it. By morning, the woman was gone from the lobby, replaced by another guest, a man in his 30s carrying a duffel bag. He seemed tense, eyes darting toward the staircase as he checked in. Later that day, I crossed paths with him outside, and he admitted he hadn't slept well because of voices in the night. His room was next to mine, and I realized he must have heard the same sounds. I wanted to warn him about what I had seen, but I kept quiet, unsure if speaking it aloud would make it worse. The woman at the desk avoided my eyes completely now, and I began to suspect she knew far more than she let on. That night, I tried to stay awake. I heard the familiar footsteps, then the low murmur of voices. They grew louder until I could almost distinguish words, though none made sense. Suddenly, a heavy knock rattled my door 3 times. When I opened it, the hallway stretched long and wrong, repeating the same pattern of doors over and over. Across the hall, the woman stood again, motionless by the window. The man slumped in the chair turned his head this time, revealing eyes that were dark and unblinking. I stumbled back, slamming my door shut. For hours, I pressed my back against it, afraid it would open on its own. When dawn finally came, I packed quickly, intent on leaving. Yet something pulled me back, one last time. I glanced across the hall, and to my shock, the room stood empty. No furniture, no window, only bare floorboards and peeling wallpaper, as if the figures I had seen were never there at all. At checkout, the man at the desk simply slid my receipt forward without looking at me. Behind him, the key rack held dozens of faded tags, yet the ones I recognized bore no numbers, only faint letters spelling out words I refused to read. I drove away with the image of that woman burned into my mind, her stillness unnatural, her silence heavier than any scream. Even now, when nights grow quiet, I catch myself listening for those same footsteps, wondering if the hallway has followed me. I tell myself it was only a hotel, a tired traveler's imagination. But deep down I know that room, that chair, and those voices are waiting somewhere, patient and unforgotten. Part 4. The Silent Ward. When Harper told me about the hospital on the edge of town, I thought she was exaggerating. She said it had been closed for decades, a place where people whispered about empty halls and lights that flickered even without power. Daniel, always eager to challenge fear, suggested we go together one weekend, like it was nothing more than an adventure. I agreed, though the thought of stepping into a building abandoned for so long made my skin tighten. Carol didn't say much when she overheard our plan, only that some doors should stay locked, her words carrying the same flat weight as when she had warned us about the attic. The hospital stood like a skeleton of concrete and glass, its windows dark and hollow, ivy climbing the walls as though trying to choke the life from it. The main entrance was broken, doors hanging crooked on their hinges, so we slipped inside without resistance. The air was colder, the smell of rust and mildew wrapping around us like a damp sheet. The halls stretched long and narrow, lined with peeling paint and faded signs pointing to wards and treatment rooms that no longer served their purpose. My footsteps echoed too sharply, as though the building was listening. We moved deeper, guided by our flashlights. Daniel stayed ahead, kicking aside debris, while Harper lingered near me, her voice low whenever she spoke. In one corridor, we found rows of wheelchairs, all pushed against the wall in perfect alignment, though their wheels were coated with dust so thick it looked like they hadn't been touched in years. The silence was broken by a faint tapping sound, rhythmic and steady, coming from somewhere above. I froze, gripping my light, but Daniel insisted it was just loose pipes. Harper didn't argue, though her face had lost all color. We passed through what must have been a ward. Beds with thin metal frames stood in crooked rows, mattresses torn open, stuffing spilling like old wounds. A few of the beds still had restraints dangling from them, swaying slightly as though stirred by a breeze that didn't exist. I felt an ache rise in my throat, a pressure that whispered of voices trapped in these walls. Then the tapping stopped, replaced by something worse, the faint shuffle of footsteps just beyond the circle of our light. Daniel swung his beam toward the noise, but nothing moved. Still, the footsteps grew louder, circling us slowly, deliberate as if deciding who to follow. My chest tightened as I turned, convinced I'd see someone in a hospital gown standing at the edge of the dark. But the hall was empty. Harper clutched my sleeve, her eyes wide, and I knew she heard it too. We decided to leave, but the path back twisted strangely, each hallway looking less familiar than the last. The more we walked, the more the signs on the wall blurred, letters fading until they were unreadable. We stumbled into a treatment room filled with broken equipment, glass jars clouded with dust, and charts scattered across the floor. On the wall, faint outlines of handprints stretched upward, higher than any person could reach. Harper whispered that we weren't supposed to be here, that the building didn't want us inside. Daniel, though less certain now, kept insisting we'd find the way out if we just stayed calm. Then, from the far corner of the room, a wheelchair rolled forward on its own, its wheels squeaking in the silence. We bolted. The hallways twisted again, and every corner revealed more shadows, more echoes of movement that vanished when the light caught them. My breathing came ragged, my thoughts pounding louder than my heart. At last, a sliver of daylight appeared ahead, a broken window leading to the outside. We climbed through without looking back, stumbling into the overgrown lot that surrounded the hospital. The building loomed behind us, still and silent, its windows reflecting nothing but blackness. As we caught our breath, Daniel forced a laugh, trying to shake off the fear, but his hands trembled. Harper said nothing, only staring at the hospital with eyes that seemed older now, weighed down by something unspoken. I told myself we had escaped, yet even on the drive home, I kept glancing in the mirror. For a moment, I swore I saw a figure in the back seat, pale and still, before the reflection dissolved into shadows. I haven't returned to that hospital, though sometimes at night, when the world is quiet, I hear that same faint tapping above my room, steady and patient, like a reminder that some doors never truly stay shut. Part 5. The Silent Drawers. I had no reason to be near a morgue that late, yet something in me pulled there as if I was following a thread I could not cut. The hospital had been abandoned for years, but the underground level still held the old body storage, metal drawers lined in rows, their doors streaked with rust. The air was colder than it should have been, even without working electricity. I told myself it was just the stone walls holding the night air, but deep down I felt a pressure that was not natural. I heard Daniel behind me, shuffling his feet like he regretted agreeing to come. He tried to laugh, calling this a bad idea, while Sarah, braver than both of us, walked ahead with a flashlight she had found in her car. Her beam sliced through the dimness, bouncing against tiled walls that sweated damp. Every step echoed too loudly, and I found myself holding my breath so I would not have to hear the sound of my own body moving through that space. The drawers on either side looked the same, but I felt watched by whatever still lingered inside them. Sarah touched one of the handles, and for a second, I thought it would slide out on its own. She glanced back at me with a grin that was meant to be playful, but faltered almost instantly when something tapped from inside the drawer. Daniel swore under his breath and told her to stop, though she had already dropped her hand. None of us wanted to admit we had heard the same thing, so we just stood frozen, our silence growing heavier than the air. I whispered that we should leave, but Sarah insisted on checking just one drawer. She pulled at the handle and the metal screeched, the sound scraping through my nerves until I thought my ears might bleed. It opened to nothing but a black hollow, empty as a tomb. She lifted the flashlight closer, proving that it was vacant, but the smell of decay poured out as if it had been sealed in for decades. Daniel gagged and stumbled back, knocking against another drawer, which groaned open a few inches by itself. My chest tightened as a low hum began to rise from the walls, a vibration that seemed to come from nowhere, yet made the floor beneath us tremble. I could not stop staring at the gap of that second drawer. The darkness inside looked different, thicker, almost alive. I wanted to step back, but my legs stiffened, locking me in place. A pale hand slid out, thin and colorless, with fingers too long to belong to any person. Sarah gasped and swung the flashlight toward it, but the beam flickered, fighting to stay on. Daniel cursed again, shoving me toward the door, though none of us truly moved far enough. The hand pulled itself back slowly, almost teasing, and the drawer slammed shut so hard the walls rattled. My throat burned with the urge to scream, yet no sound came out. We should have left then, but fear has a way of confusing the mind. Sarah muttered that maybe it was just some trick of pressure in the air, though I could see she did not believe her own words. Daniel paced in circles, gripping his hair, while I stared at the line of drawers, waiting for another to open. The hum had faded, but the silence that followed was worse. I forced myself to walk, one step after another, as if pretending to be calm could make me invisible to whatever shared that place with us. But when I passed the last row, I caught a glimpse of a reflection on the steel surface, not my own, but a face pressed against the metal from the inside, its mouth wide, its eyes sunk in black. I stumbled and nearly fell, calling out to the others, though my voice came weak and broken. Sarah ran over, shining her light where I pointed, but the face was gone. She said I was seeing things, though I could tell by her shaking hands she had seen something too. Daniel had already reached the stairwell, begging us to hurry, yet neither of us wanted to be the first to move. The drawers rattled then, one after another, slamming open and shut in a rhythm that made no sense. The clanging filled the basement until I thought my skull might crack from the noise. We bolted toward the exit, but the door we had come through was sealed tight, refusing to budge no matter how hard we pulled. The light failed completely, leaving us in a darkness that felt thick enough to drown in. I clawed at the wall, trying to find any seam or handle, while Sarah whispered that something was moving behind us. Daniel's breathing grew frantic, then stopped suddenly, too suddenly. I spun toward him, but the space where he had been standing was empty. Only his dropped flashlight remained, rolling in a small circle before settling still. My heart lurched painfully as Sarah gripped my arm so hard I thought she might break it. We both called his name, our voices overlapping in a frenzy, but nothing answered us. The silence pressed in again, heavier than before, as if the air itself had thickened. Sarah pulled me into the narrow hall that led deeper into the morgue, hoping there was another way out. The tiles under our shoes were slick, the walls closing in as the humming returned, lower now almost like a chant. I fought to breathe, every step a war against panic. We turned a corner and froze. Ahead, a drawer stood open, its contents spilling into the hall. A figure crawled out, pale skin stretched thin across bones, its head tilted in a way no human neck should bend. It dragged itself toward us, not rushing, almost deliberate, as though it enjoyed our horror. Sarah screamed, pulling me back, but the hall behind us was no longer empty. Shapes slid out from the doors, one after another, filling the space with their twisted forms. I clutched Sarah's hand and ran, though it felt useless, every turn leading us back to another row of drawers. The space folded around us, bending in ways that defied logic, trapping us inside. My lungs burned as shadows reached from the walls, brushing across my arms like cold silk. Sarah tripped and nearly fell, but I hauled her up, forcing her forward until we crashed into a door that was not there before. With no choice, we shoved it open and stumbled into another room. The stench hit first, sour and heavy, then the sight. Tables lined with old sheets, each lump beneath suggesting what had once been covered. Some of the sheets twitched, slow and subtle, though none of us touched them. Sarah whispered that we would die here, her voice breaking under the weight of despair. I wanted to deny it, but my body shook with the same fear. Then one of the sheets slid to the floor on its own, revealing nothing underneath, only a hollow outline pressed into the fabric, as if something invisible had lain there. The others followed, sheets falling in waves until the room was bare, the lumps gone, leaving only the fabric pooled like discarded skins. I pulled Sarah close, trembling with the knowledge that we were not alone. The hum grew louder, shaking the ceiling, dust raining down. We collapsed against the far wall, covering our ears as the room spun around us. When I opened my eyes again, the silence was complete. The tables were empty, the floor clear, and Sarah was gone. I staggered to my feet, calling her name until my throat was raw, but no answer came. Only the faint metallic clang of drawers opening in the distance, echoing through the maze. I forced myself toward the stairwell, my legs moving without thought, desperate for light, for air, for anything but the endless dark. Somehow the door at the top yielded this time, and I burst into the night, gulping the damp air like I had been drowning. The hospital stood silent, its windows black and blind. I turned back once, just once, and saw the faintest glow in the basement windows, as if dozens of eyes were pressed against the glass. I have not spoken of Daniel or Sarah since, and I doubt anyone would believe me if I did. But sometimes when I try to sleep, I hear the metallic slide of drawers opening, one by one, as if the morgue still remembers me and is waiting for me to return.